Don't camp where the forest is silent, Great Smoky Mountains. The forest went silent all at once. Not quiet, empty. Like someone had reached down from the sky and turned the world off. Evan stood frozen beside the dying campfire, his breath coming out in short white clouds. The flames had shrunk to weak orange tongues, but the cold wasn't what made his hands shake. It was the sound that wasn't there. No crickets. No owls. No wind moving through the tall trees of the Great Smoky Mountains. Even the fire stopped crackling, as if it was afraid to make noise. Behind him, the trees felt closer than before. "Lena?" Evan whispered. No answer. He turned slowly, his headlamp cutting a thin yellow line through the fog. Their tent was still there. Their backpacks were still there. But Lena, who had been sitting right across from him less than a minute ago, was gone. Then he heard it. A single footstep. Not on the trail. Not on dry leaves. But slow, careful, and close. That was when Evan realized the silence wasn't empty. It was listening. Something moved just beyond the ring of light, tall and dark, bending the shadows in a way that didn't make sense. The headlamp flickered. The air felt heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. And then a voice came from the trees. It sounded like Lena. "Evan," it said softly. Too softly. He took one step back. And the darkness stepped forward. 3 days earlier, none of this felt real. Evan Miller had driven 6 hours from Knoxville with Lena Carter, his longtime girlfriend and favorite hiking partner. They were both in their late 20s, both loved the outdoors, and both believed the Smoky Mountains were beautiful, not dangerous. The park was busy that morning. Families posed for photos. Rangers smiled at the visitor center. Warning signs about missing hikers were easy to ignore when the sun was shining and the mountains looked calm. They planned a simple 2-night backpacking trip. Nothing extreme. A marked trail. A quiet campsite listed on the official park map. "People disappear because they do dumb stuff," Evan said while tightening his boots. "We'll be fine." Lena nodded, though she had read the signs more carefully. Stories about hikers vanishing. Search teams finding shoes but no bodies. People reporting that the woods went silent right before someone disappeared. Still, the trail felt normal at first. Birds chirped overhead. Leaves crunched under their boots. Sunlight filtered through the trees like golden dust. They joked, took photos, and passed other hikers heading back down. But after a few hours, things changed. The trail narrowed. The air grew cooler. And the sounds faded. Not all at once. Slowly. Like a radio being turned down little by little. Lena stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Evan listened. "Hear what?" She frowned. "Exactly." They stood still. No birds. No insects. Just their own breathing. "It's probably nothing," Evan said, forcing a laugh. "Wind direction or something." They kept going. That was the first mistake. By late afternoon, they reached the campsite. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by thick trees far from the main trail. The sign looked old. The ground felt untouched, like people didn't stay there often. The silence was stronger here. Lena didn't like it. "This place feels wrong," she said while setting down her pack. "Like we're not supposed to be here." Evan wanted to agree. His stomach felt tight, and the forest seemed to lean inward as the sun began to drop. But they were tired, and hiking back in the dark felt worse. So they stayed. As night fell, the forest didn't wake up like it usually did. No nighttime sounds came. No rustling animals. No distant calls. Just silence. They ate dinner without talking much. The fire burned low. The fog rolled in, thick and fast, wrapping around the trees like smoke. Then Lena gasped. "Evan," she whispered. "The sounds, they're gone again." Before he could answer, the fire popped once, and then everything stopped. That was when the silence returned. And somewhere in the dark, something took a step toward their camp. Evan reached for Lena's hand. And found only cold air. The headlamp flickered. and from deep in the forest, something began to breathe. Slowly. Waiting. Evan didn't run. His legs wanted to, but fear locked them in place. The breathing came again, slow and deep, like someone standing just out of sight, taking their time. The fog thickened, turning the trees into tall, gray shapes with no clear edges. "Lena?" Evan said louder now. His voice sounded wrong in the silence, like it didn't belong here. The headlamp flickered once more, then steadied. In its weak light, he saw footprints in the dirt near the tent. They were barefoot. They led away from the camp. "Lena, this isn't funny," he said, trying to sound calm. "Come back." From the trees, her voice answered again. "I'm right here." Evan swallowed. He knew Lena's voice better than anyone. But this sounded flat. Empty. Like someone copying her without understanding how she spoke. "Where are you?" he asked. There was a pause. Then the voice said, "Come closer." Every warning sign in his head screamed at once. Ranger's advice. Stories online. The rule he remembered too late: if the forest goes silent, leave immediately. Evan grabbed his pack and took one step backward. The breathing stopped. The silence grew heavier. Then something moved fast. Branches snapped to his left. The fog burst apart as a tall shape crossed between the trees. It was too thin. Too long. Its arms bent the wrong way as it leaned forward, and for one awful second, Evan saw its face. Or what should have been a face. There were no eyes. Just a smooth stretch of dark skin where a face belonged. Evan screamed and ran. He didn't follow the trail. He didn't think. He crashed through brush and roots, his lungs burning, his boots slipping on wet ground. Behind him, the forest stayed silent, but he could feel something keeping pace with him, matching his steps without making a sound. Then, just as suddenly, noise exploded back into the world. Crickets. Wind. An owl calling in the distance. Evan tripped and fell hard, rolling down a small slope and landing in a pile of leaves. He lay there gasping, waiting for footsteps. Nothing followed. The forest sounded normal again. Too normal. He stayed on the ground for a long time before standing. His hands shook as he turned in a slow circle. No fog. No shadows moving wrong. Just trees and darkness. The silence was gone. Lena was still missing. Evan stumbled until he found the trail near dawn. Rangers met him hours later, wrapped him in a blanket, and asked him the same questions over and over. Where was Lena last seen? Did they argue? Had she wandered off? Evan told them everything. The silence. The voice. The faceless shape. They didn't write that part down. Search teams went out for days. Helicopters swept the forest. Dogs tracked Lena's scent straight to the campsite, and then stopped, whining, refusing to go farther. No body was found. No footprints. Only one thing. A ranger named Thomas pulled Evan aside on the fourth day. He was older, with tired eyes and a voice that stayed low even when no one else was around. "You're not the first," Thomas said. "And you won't be the last." He told Evan about the silent zones. Places where sound vanished. Where people heard familiar voices calling them deeper into the woods. Places the rangers avoided whenever they could. "We don't have a name for it," Thomas said. "But we know one thing. It doesn't like noise. It waits for quiet." Evan left the park broken and hollow. Weeks passed. Then months. Lena was declared missing, presumed dead. But Evan knew better. Because sometimes, late at night, when his apartment was quiet, he would hear breathing behind him. And 1 year later, against every promise he made to himself, Evan drove back to the Smoky Mountains. He told himself it was for closure. For answers. He followed the same trail. Walked to the same clearing. The campsite was gone. No sign. No fire ring. No proof it ever existed. But as the sun began to set, the forest grew still. Too still. The sounds faded one by one. And from somewhere deep among the trees, Lena's voice whispered again. "You came back. The silence closed in. And this time, Evan didn't run.